una herramienta que nosotros como equipo usamos día a día. And I'm going to turn it to English a little bit here because this first panel is going to be in English. So Notion is the platform that we use to organize all the festival, to keep track of everything, to organize the teams. And we have right here, right now, a great person, amazing, that knows everything about how to work with Notion, with a panel called Work Less, Create More. My friend Dave Cespedes, please. Big round of applause for Dave Cespedes. Thank you, guys.
Hello, hello. How's everybody feeling? Okay, and just a quick show of hands. Anybody use Notion or have heard of it before? I've got some people. Okay, little mix. Perfect, perfect. Okay. So this is going to be kind of a quick overview and some takeaways that have been useful, especially working with creative teams. My background's in architecture and have also a lot of my earlier projects getting Notion up and running for teams was with creative agencies and creative firms. So there's been some common threads and some takeaways that hopefully are useful today. And there's also going to be a few resources that if at the very end, I'll have a QR code that if you can check out and explore and maybe see if Notion's for you. So a little bit about me, born and raised in Miami, in Hialeah, and have over the past 3 years worked with a little over 50 clients, ranging from anywhere from startups to venture capital firms to creative agencies, and lately have gotten more into automations and how do we save teams time, how do we get rid of the manual repetitive work that is not the creative work but we feel like we need to do, just so that teams can focus their time and energy as much as possible on the deep creative work. So, and a little bit of background on how I got in here, because it was a little bit of a funky path, because I studied and worked in architecture before getting into operations and later into Notion Consulting. And this was one of my last projects in Chicago. It was an interior for a store called Design Within Reach. And working in architecture really highlighted that there's a lot of teams out there that are doing really creative work, but don't have systems in place to avoid burnout and to keep that same level of energy over a long period of time. So on the one hand, it was a small team. We were doing a lot of cool stuff, interiors and buildings, mostly in New York at the time. But everybody was burning out. Everybody was stressed, coming in late nights on the weekends, and felt like we just were always behind and we're never meeting our deadlines. We're never getting things done at 100%. And it wasn't that we weren't creative enough, it was that we didn't have systems to help us focus on the creative work. And a lot of this came back to project management and really kind of opened my eyes as to how, when we set systems in place as a team, or even as a solopreneur or as a freelancer, systems help unleash creativity. They definitely don't put us in a box. They kind of create a box so that we could be as creative as possible. And this kind of led me down a path of getting into operations, focusing on more of the business side of creative agencies and creative firms. And around the same time, this was back in 2018, 2019, when Notion looked very different. It was a lot less features, but just kind of coincided where we started creating content around Notion and tutorials and YouTube videos. And then that led to eventually doing that work full time. So for those of us who've never come across Notion before, the best way I can describe it is a digital all-in-one workspace tool where you can do a combination of managing tasks, planning projects, organizing documents all in one place. And this is good and bad because it's a blank canvas and you can do a lot of different things, but that could also be very overwhelming because we're not quite sure how to build our workspace or how to make it a little bit better. So, and the founder of Notion sums it up pretty well, where it's a tool for building our own tools. If we think of the past where only the biggest companies or the biggest corporations had their own software and their own tools that were customized to their teams, we're getting to a point now where we can build our own tools exactly how we work and how our teams work. So, and it's really an exciting time to do that. So the focus of today is how do we work less but create more? So how do we remove as much of the repetitive, recurring, kind of time-using tasks that really don't make a difference in our work so that we have more time and effort into the work that we do. And this has been a process that has been helpful for clients, working with clients, to change how we're working, set up systems, and I think most importantly, do it in a way that's not overwhelming. When we think about how we manage our tasks, whether we're jotting down notes in a notebook or using complicated software, it could be really overwhelming to think through how do we improve this, how do we make it better? So we want to make sure we do it in a way that's not super overwhelming. So the first step is just writing down, and this could happen in Notion, but it doesn't have to, writing down what's not working in your day-to-day work. Whether it's maybe we're spending too much time in meetings or we don't quite have a clear idea of where we are in projects, or we tend to always kind of go past our deadlines and we're not quite sure why. So really just listing this out could be a therapeutic way to get a sense of where we can improve. And I wanted to use an example from a graphic design firm that I worked with in LA, which I'm still working with, to give some kind of real examples of what this looks like. So hopefully it's a little clearer. But the first is just starting with a simple form, hey, asking team members what's not working, what could we improve? And with this team, we started finding things like we're losing track of different versions of files, we're using way too many tools, deadlines come up and we don't quite know who made deadlines, or maybe they weren't even communicated. So we start to see a pattern, and this is one example, but every team has their own challenges. But this is just one example with this creative team that the moment you give team members a platform to share, hey, where do you think we can improve? You start to get a lot of really good feedback. And this is really the starting point for thinking through what's a workspace that's going to be useful and impactful on the team. And diving a little bit deeper, so with this team, we identified, okay, there's something about project management that we could maybe rethink or reimagine. So diving a little bit deeper, we start to see a couple takeaways. There's no clear ownership over projects. Everybody just kind of jumps into different projects, and there's no clear roles for who's doing what. And especially with this team, we're noticing that people were working on the same task and didn't even realize it. So we created duplicates of creative assets or duplicates of mock-ups. So there's a lot of this stuff that was, again, coming back to project management and really just kind of impacting, okay, we need to focus on this specific thing using Notion, but again, it could be in any tool, to get this team organized, and so that everybody can open up a page and see exactly where projects are at and what is most important or highest priority to work on next. And this is kind of like a little aside, but I've noticed there's like 4 levels of project management when it comes to Notion, and one is not necessarily better than the other, but it's almost like a healthy way of figuring out where are we in our journey. But very first step, which I'm sure most of us have done in some form or another, is just kind of a simple space to jot down tasks. Simple checkboxes, we're checking them off when we're done. Even, there's a lot of teams that haven't even gotten this far with managing their projects, so this is definitely step 1 in terms of getting everything on paper, on a page, in a tool, so that everybody can see and see, okay, what do we have left to work on? But there's also limitations to this, where it's easy to build, it's easy to just kind of put in a list, but we don't quite have some things that we might need, like we can't tag team members, or we can't assign due dates. So we might need something a little bit more advanced, which is using databases. Show of hands, who use databases in Notion? Okay, less hands, but that's all good. So I always tell clients, databases are where the magic happens in Notion, because when you go from putting stuff on a page to organizing it in a database, you can start to do really powerful things like sorting tasks by due date, sorting them by priority, filtering a big database so you can only see maybe the tasks that are not completed but are due this week. So you can, even if you have databases with a lot of information, you can filter it down to keep teams focused and really just highlight what is the most important information that's going to be helpful for me and my team in the short-term future. And then if we go through one level further, this is kind of the studio assistant mode, but we can start to define our own views of that information. So when we're looking at tasks, we can say, I really want to see only the tasks that are in progress or not started, or I want to see tasks grouped by team member. So this is super helpful that you can get everybody in the same Notion page and looking at the same information and aligning teams on, okay, what are the priorities this week? What's the priorities today? Who's doing what? And especially for creative teams, this is super impactful because we can also highlight where certain team members have way too much on their plate. And this is something that happens a lot in graphic design and content creation, in architecture, where we don't even realize how much we've put onto team members' plates because we haven't visualized it. So by putting everything in one place, we can start to identify, wow, Jose's got 10 tasks due on Friday. We might need to kind of rethink these deadlines or maybe get some other team members involved to make sure that we're doing our most creative work and avoiding burnout. And then the last level, which we'll call creative director mode, this is where we can, and in this example, we're connecting a task database to project database. So now all of a sudden, we can see everything that's happening within our team across every project and see overlaps, see what's happening over the next couple weeks, couple months. And this is only using, kind of scratching the surface of what you can do in Notion, but already gives us an opportunity to create a very personalized workspace for our teams. And that's all to say, this has gotten so much easier with a lot of the new AI features, especially in Notion, where things that when I would start with a client, I'd have to kind of build these manually. And now this has just gotten a lot faster, where for a lot of teams, we could just do this on our own. And one of the guides that I'll have at the very end is hopefully useful. But if we get stuck, you can reach out, send me a message. I'll add my info at the very end. And just a few quick examples. These are called AI blocks. So you can write in a prompt into a page, have it kind of preset. And if we're just outlining, hey, here are the things that we tend to track with projects. We like to track when things are due, who's the owner, maybe who's contributing, and every team is different. You can take those notes, use the prompt that's already there, and have it give you a detailed outline of, hey, here's exactly how you need to build your database without anything that you're not going to use and only with the information that your team needs, right? So, and that's something that you build it once and you can reuse it over and over. And going a little bit further, I'm not the best coder. I don't have a software background, but in some cases, using what's called a mermaid diagram. Again, just writing a prompt in plain English, saying, hey, just map out how are these different databases connected? Like, do we need all of these connections? Is there anywhere that we really don't need, just to kind of make it easier? And now you can start to visualize, here's exactly how these different pieces are connected in Notion, and then also make changes on your own, again, using natural language without having to code or having to know certain coding languages. And then the very last step, this is the part that used to take me as a Notion consultant the most amount of time, which is building these databases, customizing them, making specific views on how teams wanted to show these. You could just add in, again in plain text, hey, I'm trying to build a database with these pieces of information. It kind of does its magic in the background. It gives us recommendations on what types of information we're using, and builds our database for us. So this is one example of how building our own tools, building our own solutions would have been impossible at one point, and even recently very difficult or very expensive. But tools like Notion, and there's a lot of other options to definitely, I'd recommend exploring, that we could personalize to fit exactly how our team works, so that you don't have to fit your work into a specific model, or you don't have to fit your work into how a software wants you to work. You could make decisions on what exactly you need to track and what's going to help your team work most creatively. So when we think of, let's say, task management, this could often feel like a random mountain of Lego pieces that we're not quite sure what this is working toward, or how this is going to be useful, or we might not be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel with our projects. And this is common, especially in creative work. But when we incorporate systems into, maybe it's Monday morning check-ins with our team, or maybe it's Friday afternoon check-ins where we're celebrating the things that we accomplished as a team, or highlighting the wins across the week that we maybe have forgotten about by the end of the week. Those systems help us at least see and visualize where all of this work is going, so that we can celebrate it, and then also just have a better idea that what we're doing, how we're doing it, and the impact that it's having on our work. And this is also something that could be a little overwhelming in Notion. I've had a few conversations already this morning that it's super exciting, but can get overwhelming really quickly. There's no right way to build our tools. And I always recommend starting as simply as possible, even if it's just that one single page with a checklist, just to get everything onto one page. And then working from there, seeing how can we improve this, how can we work smarter, and whether it looks like a simple dashboard, or whether we're incorporating all different types of information, whether it's documents, projects, meeting notes. Every team is different. And I also rarely recommend teams do everything in Notion, just because there's so many great tools out there that it's definitely worth exploring what is the best tool for our team specifically. But more often than not, Notion ends up being a good kind of starting point, so we can get all of the links to the most important stuff in one place, and really just kind of see like high-level information about our work. And this is essentially us all becoming solution designers. This is kind of laying out all the things that are not working with our team, getting input from everybody on our team, having an honest conversation about where we can improve, and then brainstorming together to figure out, okay, how can we do this differently? How can we work in a way that we can work more creatively, we could avoid burnout, and we can make sure that everybody on the team has clarity around what the big goals are with our teams. And when it comes to like thinking of the very first projects where I was helping teams with Notion, some of them failed, to be honest. Some of them, we got things up and running, we built workspaces that were really detailed, maybe a little complicated, but some of them just kind of abandoned Notion altogether and jumped into something else that maybe felt easier. And one of the big takeaways from those early projects is this is a collaborative process. It rarely works out that we get something that's pre-built, we start using it, and it's exactly what our team needs. There's always a process of kind of thinking, okay, what do we need? We don't need this. We need to kind of add something over here to make it personalized to how we work. So on that note, a couple resources to hopefully get you going, or even if you're already using Notion. The first one, which is that project management example with the tasks and projects that you can duplicate if you have a Notion account, or if not, you can create a free account. And then the second one, which is the solution builder, has a set of questions that show kind of a good example of how these AI prompts help us go from jotting down notes to getting recommendations on how we might build databases to help our work. So I'll leave this up, but from there, we could jump into questions if we have time. How are we doing on time? Good? Yeah. So, yeah, if there's any questions, definitely feel free to ask them. And otherwise, I'll be kind of roaming around thereafter. Yes? Yeah, great question. So question was, how does Notion compare to other project management softwares, right? Microsoft Project Management, yes. So there are lots of great tools out there, like Microsoft Projects and Project Manager. There's Coda, there's Asana, there's Trello. There's definitely no shortage of great software out there. And I think, when we start our projects with clients, the very first step is what's called a workflow audit, which before we talk about Notion, we're just looking at how does the team work, what are the issues that team members are having, and what tools are they using currently. And in some cases, we start working with the team and Notion is not a good solution. It's always a cost of time and effort to move from one tool to another. That slows teams down. It's a big process. The teams that tend to succeed the most in Notion are ones that like to have more control over how to set up their workspace and exactly what they need to track. And for example, there are teams that only use Notion for documents, or only using Notion for meeting notes. There are definitely teams that kind of put all of that together in one workspace, but it always comes back to what are the pain points for team members today, and then what is the best way to solve for those. And sometimes that happens in Notion, sometimes it happens somewhere else. But yeah, I'd say the biggest benefit so far has been for teams that just like to customize their own, how they manage projects, and they haven't quite found a good fit in other tools. Those teams tend to respond well to using Notion. Yep. Yes?
Oh, thank you. How you doing?
Good.
So how does pricing go? Is it go by project? Is it go by domain? So how many people are in your project that use the...
Yeah, great question. So there's a free version of Notion that, it has a cap of, I think, a number of pages that you can create in a workspace before we hit the cap. So, and I think they want to make it so that you can build enough to get a sense of if it's useful. But from there, the pricing goes anywhere from, I think, like $10 a month to $30 a month. The overwhelming majority of teams do well with the basic plan. And I know the AI features are additional to that, but when we get into the more like business or enterprise plans, the only real difference is you get more like security issues or security features. You get more kind of control over who has access to what pages. It's mostly features that are good for 100+ person teams, but for the majority of teams and creative teams that I've worked with, the kind of basic plan has been definitely more than enough to work. All right. Well, that wraps it up. I hope everybody has an amazing time today and over the next couple of days. Definitely come see me if you have any questions, and otherwise, cheers.